All right. Hello and welcome everyone to our office hours webinar for BrainHQ. We are so glad that you are taking the time out of your day today to be with us. My name is Stephanie and I'm a member of our customer delight team at Posit Science. Our goal for our office hours webinar series, in case you're new here, we're going to be showing off a specific feature or two within BrainHQ, and then we will open the floor and answer any questions that you might have about those features. So today's topic is going to be a bit of a deep dive into the science behind the exercises. So what's going to happen is our guest speaker is going to talk about the core scientific principles behind BrainHQ and how they work to build a resilient brain. And then after that, we will pivot to taking questions from the audience. So if at any point during the presentation you'd like to ask a question, you can click on the Q&A button on the Zoom control panel, and then a new little window should pop up. You can type in your question there, and then we will do our best to answer as many of those questions today as we can. Now, there are a lot more of you than there are us, which is great, but that means that we likely won't be able to answer every question live. Good news, though, if you do have any follow-up questions, you can send those to support@brainhq.com. And we also have a support site, which you can find at support.brainhq.com, that has answers to a lot of common questions. Now, the other thing that I wanted to note today is that the webinar is being recorded and it will get posted to our YouTube channel in the coming days. So if you want to be notified exactly when that video goes live, you can go to youtube.com/brainhq and subscribe there in order to receive a notification. Everyone who is registered for the webinar tonight is also going to receive a follow-up email sometime next week with a link to the replay and any additional follow-up resources that we may mention today during the webinar. All right, so a little bit about me. Before working at Posit Science, I was a science communicator and a docent at a science here based out of San Francisco. I've been working for Posit Science since 2014 as a customer delight specialist. And although I wear quite a few more hats now than I did when I first started 8 years ago, I'm still answering questions from users like you all pretty much every day. Now, my co-host today is new to the webinar scene. This is Dr. Mana Atara. Mana, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
So Mana earned her PhD in cognitive science, and she's been a senior scientist at Posit Science since 2016. So she's been leading NIH-funded clinical trials that investigate the neurochemical changes that occur when you're training with BrainHQ, and she manages several trials looking at how BrainHQ exercises can improve cognitive performance in healthy adults and those with MCI and early dementia. She's going to be leading the discussion today about the science behind BrainHQ, and then after that demo, like I said, she and I are going to be tag teaming any questions about the science that you might have. All right, so Mana, go ahead and take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Stephanie. All right, so thanks everyone for coming today. As Stephanie mentioned, this is the science webinar in our office hour series, and I'm very happy that you all have joined us today for this event. I'm going to spend about 20 minutes of our hour together talking about the core scientific principles behind BrainHQ, how they adapt in speed and accuracy to drive a faster, more resilient brain. And then we'll do a few demos of exercises so that you can see how the principles are applied and how the exercises really work together to engage and strengthen different areas of the brain. So scientists' understanding of how the brain works has undergone an enormous change over the past few decades. When we talk about brain plasticity, we're really talking about the brain's ability to adapt, to organize itself, and to drive structural, functional, and chemical changes throughout our lives based on what we learn and what we experience. And I say all this because in a way, this theoretical framework is actually relatively new. 30 or so years ago, the prevailing view of the brain is that it was hardwired. You got what you got, there was nothing you could do about it, especially if you were fortunate enough to approach an older age. But now, at least in the community of neuroscientists, at least it's well established that the adult brain is highly plastic. And if we're able to change brains at all, then we should be able to change brains in a helpful direction to improve cognitive function and brain health. So where brain plasticity comes from are experiments like these showing that the adult brain can be dramatically reorganized and improved. We're looking at a rat model here because we can't do these kinds of experiments on humans. And you'll see 3 rows of information. There's a neurologically healthy, high-performing rat at the top. There's a lower performing rat in the middle. Maybe they're performing less well due to some form of physical or chemical damage or due to advanced age. And then at the bottom, you'll see that there's a low performing rat that's actually graduated from a brain training program built for rats that's designed to improve the speed and accuracy of auditory information processing. And in the right column, we're seeing the changes that can occur in the rat brain by having to train on these auditory exercises. So the colorful images are maps of neural precision in the rat's brain. Each of these polygons represents a color-coded map of how precise the brain is in auditory cortex. So is it giving us precise information about the sounds in the outside world shown in blue or green, or is it giving us really noisy information shown in orange and red? Which means that those regions of the brain respond too broadly to too many different tones. And in healthy rats, you can see that most of the brain is fast and accurate, shown in those blues and greens. But an untrained, low-performing rat, we see that more and more regions of the brain are showing red and orange. They're responding too broadly to too many frequencies. And of course, this is true in humans as well. This is why some people say, for example, my grandkids talk too fast, I can't understand them. Or whenever I go to a restaurant, I can't hear because there's too much background noise. It's because these brains have slowed a bit in their processing. They're noisier than they used to be. But if we take that lower performing rat and put it through about 20 hours of brain training over the course of about 4 weeks, we see this pretty dramatic change such that the map of neural precision is renormalized. It now looks much more like the high performing rat than it does the untrained low performing rat. So the cognitive training we're talking about here is really operating at a neurological level. And there are about 5 principles that drive these positive brain changes. And we have implemented these principles to create the exercises that you see in BrainHQ. So the first principle is that an effective brain training exercise must be speeded so that your brain learns how to process information it sees and hears quickly. The second principle is accuracy, because the exercise must drive the brain to correctly identify what exactly it saw or heard. The third is adaptivity, because brains change most under moderate challenge. So we don't want the exercise to be too easy. We also don't want it to be impossible. The fourth principle is generalizability, because you want your training to transfer to the more natural scenes you see in the real world, day in, day out. And the fifth principle is engagement, because at the most fundamental level, brain chemicals are what reorganize brains. So the exercises make you pay attention to engage your cholinergic systems. They give you rewards to engage your dopaminergic systems, and they introduce novelty to engage your this word is also really difficult, norandrogenic systems. So all exercises in BrainHQ are governed by these 5 principles. And when we train humans in randomized clinical trials using these exercises, what we see is that training improved the neural health of the human brain and its cognitive performance, and it even generalized to life in the real world. We aren't just getting better at the tasks that we train on. And this link at the top right here will take you to the list of published peer-reviewed papers using BrainHQ if you're interested in reading the original research. All right, so let's do some demoing here of the exercises. So we're going to demo a few exercises and talk about how they put these 5 principles of brain plasticity into practice. We're going to start with Hawkeye, which trains your brain to quickly find an item that's different from the others. And we perform these kinds of visual search tasks hundreds of times in our daily life, such as looking for a specific email in our inbox, looking for keys in a cluttered room, or for a particular book on a bookshelf. And I'm going to go ahead and start a level from this exercise. And we're going to go through the tutorial together. It has written instructions on how to play the task, as well as some practice. And then finally, we'll do the real training once we're ready. All right, so you're going to see a bird highlighted here. Its wings are a bit darker than the other birds, and its head is colored black, whereas the other birds' heads are colored in red. And this bird looks different from the others, and the bird can briefly appear anywhere on the screen, and your job is to report where it was. All right, so when that bird appeared on the screen, that information was sent to your visual system and then it was quickly taken away. And your brain had to do the best it could to quickly and accurately process what it just saw, given that it was only available for less than a second. And so in order to do its best, your brain paid attention, which causes your brain to pump acetylcholine, a neurochemical involved in attention. And acetylcholine tells your brain to be ready for change because something interesting is about to happen. And once the bird disappears, you have the spotlight that you can move around the screen. And you can use the spotlight to select the location that the bird appeared and give your answer. Okay. Now, when we got the answer right, we got a little reward, that pleasant ding sound. And getting an answer right and hearing that ding actually causes your brain to release some dopamine, a neurochemical involved in reward systems and brain plasticity. And dopamine tells your brain, whatever you just did, that worked. So reorganize your brain a little bit to do more things like that. Now notice that there are a lot of birds on the screen vying for your attention, trying to distract you away from the target bird, the one that's different. And where the target bird appears on the screen will be unpredictable. And on each turn, its location is going to surprise you, each time releasing norepinephrine. And at first, the birds are going to be presented on the screen for a long time. But as you go through the exercise, the amount of time you get to see the birds will get shorter and shorter. And that means your brain has to get faster and faster to keep up. And this is how we apply the principle of adaptivity. It's what optimizes the training experience for your individual needs and keeps you at that sweet spot where the task is neither too difficult nor too easy. Let's do some of these turns together. So as I'm getting these right, you'll see that the birds will appear on the screen for less and less time. It's going to get faster now. You see the challenge bar at the top move to the right. It's going to get even faster now. And this is how the exercise is driving your brain to perceive the visual scene faster and faster. Now let's see what happens if we get a few trials wrong. It's going to get slower on the next turn. It's going to tell me where it was and get even slower the next time so that we can successfully reach that point where we can engage with the program. And this adjustment of the speed ensures that you can engage with the exercise no matter where you begin. And then with practice, the program will push your brain to get faster and faster over time. So let's take a moment to click on different levels and demonstrate how the Hawkeye exercises, how the levels within the Hawkeye exercise changes over time to support generalization. So in this very first level, you can see that the birds are pretty close to the middle of the screen, right to the center. But in other levels, so I'm going to click on Hawkeye at the bottom, each of these boxes reflects a unique level within the Hawkeye exercise. I'm going to click on level 2 now. In other levels like this, you're going to see that the birds are pulled way out towards the edge of the screen. And this is to train your peripheral vision. So let's do a few practice turns of this level. And our task is the same. Find the oddball bird, the one that looks different from the others. And you'll find here with this level, the birds are really pulled out far to the sides of the screen to expand your field of view. Now it's going to get a bit slower. A bit slower. See, now they're on the screen for much longer than before. Okay. And then you'll also find that earlier levels of Hawkeye, like this one, the contrast between the brightly colored birds and the blue sky is very high, just like here. This gives the brain a lot of time to see the stimuli and they pop out from the background, which drives a strong response to the brain, helping drive brain plasticity. In other levels, however, the birds become a lot more similar, and this challenges the brain to make finer distinctions. So let's give an example. I'm going to click on Hawkeye again, and I'm going to scroll down to, let's do this level. So now take a look at these birds, the target and the distractors. Here you see the target, which is this bird right here, differs from the distractors only in that it has ever so slightly more blue on the tips of its wings. And if we complete a few trials, I'm sure many of us will feel that this level is harder than the previous one we played. Let's give it a try. Okay, here it appeared next to the water and the sand, so it's a little easier to spot. I didn't see that one. I'm going to click here. Okay, it was right next to the bush almost. That made it a bit harder. This one, it was against the sky, so that made it a bit easier for me. See, it becomes a lot harder when it's on top of the palm trees and the bushes. And then finally, the difference between the birds and the background scenery will become more subtle, like this level, for example. This is where you can see that these green birds, and there are birds if you look really quite closely, these birds just melt into the forest scene. And all of these changes, the similarity between the target and the distractor birds, how far from the center they're pulled out, and the complexity of the background, all work together to train your brain to pick up on subtle differences so that you can have a faster brain in more natural, real-world environments. And the question we often get is, are we training you to be a better bird watcher? And the answer to that is no. By using different birds, different distances, and more complex, increasingly complex backgrounds, we're systematically training your whole visual field to see things faster and more accurately. And this is needed for a number of daily activities you perform in your life, such as driving, where you need to be able to continuously survey the visual environment and quickly and accurately spot critical events, such as pedestrians, traffic signs, as well as other cars. Okay, so let's go ahead and change gears and talk about fine-tuning. And this exercise trains your brain to hear auditory information more quickly and accurately. But before we begin, let's do a real life demo together. You all are muted, so you can go ahead and do this demo with yourselves comfortably in your own home. And grab your thumb and your index finger and put it on your voice box over here and make a ba sound like baby. Ba, ba, ba. And you'll find that your voice box starts to vibrate as soon as you open your lips when you make the ba sound. Ba, ba, ba. Now I want you to make a pa sound, like in papa. Pa, pa, pa. Here your lips open just a little bit before your voice box starts to vibrate. Pa, pa, pa. And the difference between a ba and a pa is just a few tens of milliseconds. And those milliseconds are actually really, really important. If your brain is slowing down a bit, it's very hard to detect that brief pause. And so you're not quite sure what someone said. You ask them to repeat themselves, and what they say doesn't stick in memory. In kids and adults, this may show up as auditory processing disorder, for example. But if your brain is processing information quickly and accurately, you'll hear that distinction, you'll hear it clearly and easily, and therefore be able to remember it better. And you'll be able to do it even in a noisy environment when someone is talking quickly. So let's train your brain to be fast and sharp and hear speech quickly and accurately by demoing a level of fine-tuning. I'm going to go ahead and go down to this level right here. So in this exercise, you'll hear one of two sounds that are similar, such as bo or po, and you'll need to quickly and accurately pick which sound you just heard. And as you go through this level, the sounds will be presented for less and less time, and that's going to force your brain to make quick and accurate discriminations of what it just heard. And when the sounds are presented slower, the consonant will be big and loud and separate from the vowel. And then as the speech speeds up, the consonant will be softer and closer to the vowel. And as you go through the level, the difficulty will adapt to you, which is how we leverage the principle of adaptivity.
Po.
So that sounded like a po to me. So I'm going to select po, and that was our practice trial. Now I'm going to click start and we'll launch the actual training level.
Bo.
That sounded like bo.
Bo.
That's going to get faster.
Po.
That was po.
Po.
Going to get faster now.
Po. Bo.
Even faster.
Po. Po. Po.
And as we're getting these right, the speech is compressing and it's getting faster. So now let's get a few wrong and see what happens.
Po. 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 Po.
And as we're getting these wrong,
Bo.
listen to how the speech is being stretched out now to make it easier to hear.
Bo.
So that's emphasized
Bo.
by quite a bit.
Bo.
And different levels of this exercise leverage the principle of generalization. You'll be training across lots of confusable speech sounds, such as ga versus ka, or vo versus tho. And this helps so that by the end, your brain's entire speech processing system becomes faster and more accurate. And getting better at fine-tuning will help lead to better real-world performance, because accurately hearing speech syllables will make you less prone to miscommunication. And the last exercise we'll be demoing is Mindbender, which trains your mental flexibility. So in this exercise, you have to keep your wits about you. You'll get a role to remember throughout the level. So for example, if the images you see are digits, like here, then choose the higher digits. So 13 is the right answer because these are digits and 13 is higher than 12. And then if the images you get are words, like here, then choose the lower one. So 4 is less than 6. So we're going to select 4. And then once you begin, you'll have to quickly and accurately categorize the images based on the rule you learned. So let's go ahead and give it a try. We'll do a few practice first. So this is higher, lower, lower, higher. And let's go and start the real block. Lower. Oops, that's supposed to be higher. Words are lower. Oops, that's supposed to be higher. So digits are higher, lower, lower, higher, 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 lower. And so like Hawkeye and fine tuning, I'm going to pause this. You'll need to process the information quickly and accurately, and the exercise will adapt to you by getting faster. But now it's not just about processing. How fast you respond also matters. So this exercise is training you how to process the scene and enter a response in less and less time. And as you progress through the levels of this exercise, the rule you need to sort by will become more complex, and the images will change. And these changes support the principle of generalization and helps your brain operate under rapidly changing conditions, such as across a wide range of circumstances. And in daily life, situations really can change in an instant. So brains that are mentally flexible are better able to select the right action plan for the situation at hand and to change that plan as needed as new information comes in. So I lastly want to mention that the 29 exercises you see in BrainHQ here at the bottom work synergistically. You have exercises such as Hawkeye, engaging your visual and spatial networks of the brain. You have exercises like fine tuning, engaging the auditory areas of the brain. And then you have exercises like Mindbender, engaging the frontal areas involved in higher order cognitive processing, such as decision making. Great. So we've known for a long time now that certain things that people do over the course of their whole life seem to make their brain more resilient to the effects of aging. So for example, people who attain a higher level of education have a more resilient brain. It's clear that people who lead a more cognitively active life in their work or as part of their non-work life derive the same benefit. So I hope one of the learnings you leave with today is that brains can change for the better across the lifespan, and it's not age that prevents you from learning new tricks. It's that a brain gets old once you stop acquiring new skills and new information. So by continually learning, you're building a healthy brain that actually becomes resilient against the effects of age. All right, we can open up the floor for questions now.
All right, that sounds great. So we've had quite a few questions come in during the presentation. Wonderful presentation, by the way. So let's go ahead and talk about maybe what sort of activities people can do outside of training with BrainHQ to keep their brain sharp. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, I do. I have quite a few thoughts on this. So there are absolutely things outside of cognitive training that you can do on a regular basis. I feel like with modern living, we're constantly outsourcing our memory to our phone, to our apps, and to pen and paper. So instead of doing math in our head, we're using a calculator. Instead of leveraging our internal navigation networks, we're using GPS. And instead of remembering directions or our to-do list or our appointments, we're writing everything down that we possibly can. So over time, the outsourcing of these mental operations throughout the day, every single day, really causes a down regulation in the activity and engagement of the brain networks responsible for these types of operations. So what we should be doing instead is using our brain to encode and retain information as frequently as possible. So you can use your app, your phone, your pen and paper as backup if you absolutely need, but start relying on your brain instead. And over time, you will stop needing to use these external memory strategies. And actually, one of my favorite findings in the literature is on London taxi drivers who have had to take one of the hardest memory tests in the whole world. And they need to use their memory and spatial networks for navigation, and they need to do it quickly. They can't write down instructions to get from point A to point B. And as a result of this type of training, imaging studies on their brain show that their hippocampi actually increase in volume. So your brain, just like your muscles, follow this use it or lose it maxim. A few activities I would suggest are finding activities that are speeded, so they get faster and faster and you have to do the task in less time, and they get progressively harder based on your own individual performance abilities. You really need something that adapts to you, and then they should engage your cholinergic dopaminergic systems. So for example, you could find board games or other games that are speeded and get progressively harder. I suggest continuously learning, learn a new language, learn a new instrument, brush up on one you used to know, try to read the sight music more quickly. And then try to complete activities in your daily life faster than you usually would. So let's say you're making dinner one night, pretend you're on Top Chef for fun and cut up your vegetables just like the chefs on that show would. And all of these things, all of these activities that you engage with daily are going to lead to a healthier, more resilient brain.
That Top Chef suggestion is so much fun. Also very stressful if you do it wrong, like take it easy.
Yeah, we want to keep our thumbs.
Yeah, exactly. Like we don't want a trip to the emergency room. Okay, so we talked about some activities that you can do outside of BrainHQ that keep your brain sharp, but what about games like crossword puzzles or Sudoku or anything like that? Have those been shown to have cognitive improvement?
So the games you mentioned have served as what are called active control games across published studies, although they're not inert. And what I mean by that is that doing them is absolutely better than doing nothing. They're not neurologically informed, and they're not designed to leverage the principles of neuroplasticity. So the gains from those tasks in clinical trials do not match the gains from targeted cognitive training. What you need are games that are speeded. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but games that are speeded, they get faster and faster. You have to do the task in less time. They get progressively harder based on your individual performance. You really just need something that adapts to you. Those games are fun though. So if you enjoy them, keep doing them.
Yeah.
It's
And
also incorporates speed.
yeah, absolutely. And so we keep bringing up this idea of speeded exercises or tasks that are speeded. There are some exercises within BrainHQ that are timed and other exercises aren't. Would you kind of enlighten us more about the idea behind like these timed exercises or these continuous performance trials, for example?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So most of BrainHQ exercises give you unlimited time to respond. They drive how quickly you can process visual and auditory information, but not how quickly you can enter your answer. So several exercises, a small subset. So MindBender, like the one we did, divided attention, mixed signals. These exercises are known as continuous performance tasks, and they move quickly and they require you to process what you saw or heard, and they require you to enter your response really quickly. So now we're strengthening the communication across your sensory and motor networks so that you can train how quickly information comes in through your senses, is processed, and then is acted upon, which is critical for daily life. So for example, if something is coming towards you, you don't just want to see it. You want to be able to see it and then move out of the way.
Yeah, great example. Very important for safety and balance countermeasures and all of that. So speaking of CPT exercises, we had somebody write in sort of a related question. How do you get better at exercises that seem to incorporate more than the one particular skill it might be categorized under? So for example, Card Shark is under the intelligence category, but there's a visual component to that exercise as well as there being a timed component. Or for example, True North in some of the later levels, there's also an auditory component where you are verbally given instructions and you need to remember those. Can you talk about how to categorize exercises when they're created, and what the basis for categorizing the exercises when they are multimodal like that, how that sort of came to be?
We categorize them based on what so this person raises a really interesting and important topic. So a lot of these exercises have significant overlap. All BrainHQ exercises, all 29, have a speeded component. There's one brain speed category, but all of them have speed. All of them also engage memory because you're making decisions based on stimuli that are no longer in front of you. So that automatically engages your memory networks. There is significant overlap across exercises, but at the same time, the way we try to categorize these are based on one, in the experimental literature, like Card Shark is known as an executive function working memory task. Same with auditory ACE. So and partly through the empirical literature, also through what components they engage most. So yes, Card Shark can be speeded, but also it relies heavily on executive function. So it's going to appear in the intelligence section. Or MindBender has a visual component, but it's most strongly a set shifting exercise. So it's going to appear under intelligence because that's known in the literature to be more executive functioning.
Yeah, so that's a great way of putting it, because that is a question that we sometimes get in customer support is, hey, I did a memory exercise, but it was really like all about, auditory processing. Why was it categorized that way, for example?
Yeah, and it's usually because what's changing in that exercise is the number of items to remember. So if you have to categorize it based on along any dimension, you do the thing that's most central to that exercise.
Exactly, because there's more than one stimuli in all of our
Mhm.
exercises, whether or not you realize it.
Yeah.
Um,
They all engage brain systems as a whole. There's nothing just targeting one isolated area of the brain.
Yeah, and actually, talking about systems, so the brain is part of a larger interconnected system. Somebody had asked, how does BrainHQ influence our nervous system or like the vagus nerve when we are in the middle of a fight or flight response? And does that have any sort of effect on plasticity overall?
Yeah, there's actually
It's a
some.
really interesting question that I don't know I've ever been asked before.
It is. That is a really, that is a great question. So there's actually a researcher who, her name is Dr. Venki Lin. She used to be at the University of Rochester. She recently moved to Stanford, and she is the only one who has actually, started that line of work. And she did it relatively recently. I think it was a 2017 or so. And she actually had people train on BrainHQ while measuring their heart rate variability. And which is innervated by the vagus nerve. And what she found is that when they're training on BrainHQ versus, she compared it to games like crossword puzzles and Sudoku and word search, she found that the BrainHQ exercises actually increased heart rate variability. So it had more vagus nerve activation than the games that were not speeded and not adaptive.
That's so
But yeah, the vagus nerve, it's it pumps out a lot of neurochemicals, and she believes it's a driver of positive neuroplastic change.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just about to ask what sort of the implication would be, or if those findings have even been published yet, if it was a recent study.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, they have been published, and it's a really great paper. So she speaks to the bidirectionality of brain plasticity, where the vagus nerve can actually promote brain plasticity, and then having a healthier brain can have you have a healthier vagus nerve.
Yeah, it all kind of comes full circle.
Mhm.
All right, so here's a question that you definitely touched on during the presentation, but can you go over that G part of the SAGE? Have we been able to demonstrate generalization from BrainHQ exercises and what that looks like in real life?
Absolutely. So that is just such an important question is, does the training you do here on a computer generalize to the real world? And the answer is yes. So this is what's kind of difficult. So the reason why the field of cognitive training is honestly such a murky field is because a lot of companies have not done the legwork to validate their product. Over 60% of companies on the market have no empirical evidence showing that they work. So what you keep seeing in the media are reports that cognitive training used as an umbrella term for all programs do not generalize to untrained tasks. But the published papers on BrainHQ will show you that specific forms of training, so speed and accuracy, do in fact generalize. And so that link I provided on one of the slides, if you click it, when it says 200 published studies, if you click it, that will take you to a list of all published studies using BrainHQ. And there are a number of clinical trials showing generalization. So reduce car accidents, improve skill acquisition, a dose-dependent decrease in dementia incidence 10 years after training by 29 to 48%, depending on how much you trained. There was improved hearing in noisy environments. There was a reduction in depressive symptoms and a delay in the onset of depression. There are quite a few, better workplace efficiency, fewer on-the-job accidents. So yeah, there's a list there. And you can see their original peer-reviewed research showing that these training exercises really do carry over to real life performance.
Yeah, and that's the basis of BrainHQ. Our background is in science. We were founded by scientists who were coming out of a neuroscience lab, so they were in academic circles for a very long time. So the science is really the thing that we want to get to the people, and it's the thing that I would say that we probably pride ourselves most on being able to help people with is this accurate and helpful science. So moving on to the next question here. We've talked about these benefits that you can get from brain training with BrainHQ. The answer for this question, I think, is going to vary from person to person, but how long would you say that it takes for people training with BrainHQ to see gains or benefits from the training?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's highly variable. So there's no single right way to train. There are very few wrong ways to train. Of the 200 published studies, I just kind of want to give you a taste of what's out there. Very different training schedules were used. So some of those studies had 2-hour sessions 5 times a week, and some had 1-hour sessions 4 times a week. Some had 30-minute sessions only twice a week, and then some studies had 20-minute sessions every single day to aid in habit formation, in much the same way that you're expected to exercise daily and eat well daily. And then some studies were only allowed their participants to train on a single task, and the whole rest of the BrainHQ app was completely blocked. Others were allowed to train on 6 exercises, and others were allowed to train on 29, and they chose what they want. A number of those studies were done independently at the Mayo Clinic. So the best schedule is going to be the one that you adhere to. That's going to you be able to integrate into your daily life. And the reason why we have multiple ways to train on BrainHQ is because some people like to have the guesswork of the training taking out, and that's why they use a personal trainer. And then others like to drive their own bus and select the exercise they want using a la carte. But in general, I think as a whole, the research says that train intensively, and you can get anywhere between 10 to 40 hours, the minimum being 10 as the smallest effective dose, but do it intensively. Don't do 10 hours over the course of a few years. Do it within 5 weeks. And then you can actually take a break from training and maybe come back a year later for a few booster sessions. But I'd say, depending on your individual needs, if you're a healthy older adult, 10 hours within 5 weeks, split up however you want, maybe 2 hours per week split up in 4 30-minute sessions would be good. And then if there's some, if there's a clinical need, let's say you have auditory processing disorder, for example, or maybe you have schizophrenia, then maybe going up to 40 hours or so over the course of 12 to 16 weeks would be a good idea.
Yeah, and if you are part of an impacted group and are interested in figuring out how BrainHQ is set up for various studies, you can always shoot us an email. We work with Mana and many other scientists, and we can always get clarification on what exercises in BrainHQ were used, and we can help you set up the personal trainer to best match that study if you're interested in that as well. Yeah, so great question and an amazing answer. So actually, talking about the personal trainer, this person had asked, are exercises individualized based on a person's strengths and weaknesses, or does the personal trainer know how to hone in on those areas for improvement? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So the way the trainer works is that you see more levels of an exercise you struggle with and fewer levels of an exercise you don't struggle with. So each time a user starts a personal trainer session, the algorithm looks at the user's entire training history, every level of every exercise the user has done. It evaluates what they showed good performance on and what they showed opportunities for growth on. And then it selects the next exercise for the user to do. So in this way, the personal trainer adapts over the course of days and weeks and months to personalize the experience for every single person who needs it. And then over time, the personal trainer will eventually work you through every exercise and every level that BrainHQ offers.
Yeah, and what I will also say is we actually did an office hours episode or webinar on the personal trainer. We did a deep dive into that about 2 months ago. So if you want to review that and see the nitty gritty of how the personal trainer picks out exercises and how you can change your trainer settings, you can go to our YouTube channel. That's going to be youtube.com/BrainHQ, and we have all of our previous office hour webinars posted there that you can view at any time for free. All right, so speaking of exercises that are maybe a little bit difficult for people in certain populations, will the exercises still be effective for people that are maybe experiencing like hearing loss? And do we recommend training with hearing aids, for example?
You do. You absolutely should train with hearing aids, is my opinion. In fact, it's like it's a modifiable risk factor. Where if you have trouble hearing, having hearing aids is actually going to improve your brain health. And same with if you can't see or if you have cataracts, getting that taken care of it will also improve your brain health.
Can you talk about the efficacy of those exercises and whether or not those are still helpful to use?
Yeah, so there have been a few papers showing that training on the auditory exercises. So this includes sound sweeps, fine tuning, syllable stacks, memory grid, to-do list training, and in the know showed a reversal of neural timing delays. So it made the brain faster. It improved speech and noise processing, improved hearing in noisy environments, like having a conversation when you're at a restaurant. So absolutely, no matter where you are, that's why the exercises adapt. They have such a wide range of adaptation, is so that anyone, regardless of where they start, can engage with the program, but all brains can improve. So, at this point, of those studies that have been published, they have been in more than 20 actual indications that have included things like ADD, major depressive disorder, mild cognitive impairment, early dementia, severe psychosis, chemo brain, and all of these brains in those papers have been shown to improve with training. So you're not stuck.
Yeah, you're not stuck.
Right.
There's always room for improvement. Continuing on with auditory exercise questions, there are some exercises that use like nonsense words or syllables. We already talked about that as when you did your demo with fine tuning with like the ba and the da. But can you speak a little bit more to the extremes of like shrinking or shrinking and then extending the vowel sounds, and sort of reiterate why that's important for us in order to have a healthy and fast, accurate brain?
Absolutely. So human speech, as you know, is composed of very fast components. So for example, the difference between a ba and the pa sound, as you saw, is just a brief gap of a few tens of milliseconds. So we process the speech sounds in BrainHQ with a digital algorithm that actually stretches the speech sounds out to make them slower and emphasize the loudest parts. And then this drives a strong response in the brain, helping to drive brain plasticity, right? Because it's really clear. It's not a noisy representation of the information. It's a very clear one. And then as auditory exercises use speech to get more challenging, we remove that stretching and that emphasis. And then we actually compress the speech to make it faster than normal. And that challenges your brain to speed up. And this is really designed to help the improvements from these exercises transfer to real life listening conditions where you might be listening to someone speak quickly and need to process and remember what they said.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question that I don't know that I've ever been asked this before. Are there exercises within BrainHQ that would force the brain to slow down? So for example, if you have a habit or a behavior that you want to change that you kind of like snap to automatically, but you want to be able to slow down enough to make a conscious decision when you do it, is there something in BrainHQ that would be effective for that? My sort of gut is that, like, if you can process information faster, you can catch yourself before you jump onto the automatic response. But I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, my interpretation of the question is that maybe the brain needs a little bit more inhibitory control to be able to control. So it's not just rapid thoughts, being fired, but they actually get to control and slow down what they're thinking about and paying attention to. So attention and inhibitory control are the exercises I would suggest, and that would include exercises like divided attention, mind bender, freeze frame, mixed signals, and then I think it's good to always have double decision in every training exercise.
Yeah, double decision is always the great go-to.
Yeah, that's the best exercise in my opinion.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of freeze frame, we do have a question about freeze frame here. Freeze frame functions a little bit differently than a lot of our other exercises. Can you talk to the sort of design elements behind freeze frame? Because, like, we used to have an old version of freeze frame that is not the version that we use today, and why we maybe made those changes.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So most of the levels within BrainHQ last about 2.5 minutes or so. Freeze frame, if you've played beyond the first 4 levels 5 through 40 last about 10 minutes long. And that's probably a little unexpected if you're used to playing the other levels of BrainHQ. But the reason why we did that is because freeze frame is meant to be a sustained attention task. So it's sustained attention. It's also inhibitory control. It has both components in there. It also has a strong motor component, and it's the reason why it's 10 minutes long is because we're matching it as closely to the original validation paper. So freeze frame was developed through grants funded by the National Institutes of Health. We developed the exercise, we ran it through a few studies, and then when we implemented it on BrainHQ, now the way you see it currently, its form most closely matches those validated studies.
Yeah, and actually that makes kind of a nice segue into our next question, which is, how do we know how much training per week we should do? Normally we say between 60 and 90 minutes, and we model that after a lot of the studies that have been done that look at the efficacy of BrainHQ. So if you log into BrainHQ and the recommendation is still set to like 24 levels a week, that's based on going somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes of training per week and doing that 3 times a week. So that's modeled after one of the, I forget if it was the active or the impact study, but it was modeled after one. Yeah. And so let's see, we have so many good questions here, and we're getting a little bit crunched for time here. I think we have time for maybe 1, maybe 2 more. Oh, interesting. Will BrainHQ or could BrainHQ help with people who are experiencing brain fog from COVID or other conditions?
That is currently an area of active research that we're pursuing. The pandemic is relatively new, all things considered. So
and science takes a long time to go through and do it right.
Science takes a long time to go through. My sense, though, is that, if this has been shown to work in 20 indications, our thinking is that it's really improving the integrity of brain systems, irrespective, independent of whatever is driving that. So a lot of conditions come with brain fog, and mild cognitive impairment comes with brain fog. ADD can come with brain fog. Chemo brain comes with brain fog. They're all
any number of conditions.
Yeah. So brain fog driven by COVID, I don't expect it to act any differently and be any less responsive. But the jury is out, and it's good to have a published paper before we make any definitive conclusions here.
Yeah, I almost
give it a try. BrainHQ is not something like you don't really lose anything by
it's not going to hurt to do the training while you're waiting for those results to come out necessarily. All right, so I think we've got just time for maybe one more question here. Oh, actually, this is actually probably a good thing to show off. We had a couple people chime in that wanted to figure out how to get to the science portion of the website where we can see all those studies. So I'm going to go ahead and actually share my screen here, and I'll show you all how to navigate to that. So I'm on the BrainHQ homepage. I'm logged into an account right now. The quick and easy way to do that is if you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, there's a little link here in the footer called the science that you can click on. And that's going to open up a tab with information about why BrainHQ is effective, the proven benefits, and we have links to our hundreds of published studies available on our site here. And these are broken down into various populations as well. So if you have a question about a specific condition that BrainHQ has been used in a paper for, you can see all of that information here on our website.
And you can click these, so for example, go under mild cognitive impairment. If you click on those categories, the drop-down list will appear.
Yeah,
so papers.
So these are, for example, all of the papers that took a look at BrainHQ and studies involving MCI or mild cognitive impairment. So you can click on those, and then you can read the papers for yourselves. And like I said, if you have any questions about any of the exercises that were used in these kinds of studies, feel free to use that help button on our site and reach out to our support team. If we don't know the exact exercises that were used, we can always get a hold of Mana or any of our other scientists and figure out that answer for you all. All right, so I think that's going to wrap it up here for our webinar today. Thank you all so much for participating. I'm sorry that we didn't have the opportunity to answer every question, but like I said, use that help button or send us an email, support@brainhq.com if you have any follow-up questions. Our next webinar next month on August 24th, it's going to be nutrition for brain health, and that's part of our BrainHQ Academy webinar series. All right, I think I'm good here. Mana, do you have any last words or any last takeaways that you want people to walk away from this webinar with?
No, I think we covered everything. Thank you all for joining. That was a lot of fun, and thank you for all the wonderful questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again so much, Mana, for jumping in on the webinar and taking all those questions. It was great. We should do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
All right, have a good one, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.